JB property hype is back again. The agents are back, but on TikTok this time. Developers are going back in, both buying up new land and redeveloping their existing plots. Showrooms are seeing signs of human activities again, and this time it's different. They say, headlines are showing that the RTS is being completed by the end of 2026, and commutes from JB into Singapore will now take 30 minutes only instead of 2 hours. Really? Is it all this simple? I mean, we've seen this happen some years ago, right? Will JB properties prosper this time? Or buyers will fall into a similar trap like before? Some of you might have witnessed the previous JB property hype from 2010 to 2013. Like me, perhaps a few of you had personally experienced going into the market. But after so many years, we still see videos of ghost cities with tens of thousands of vacant units. TikToks of uniques looking for tenants at rather desperate rates and at property sites. Listings upon listings of banned auction units because the purchaser can't afford to pay anymore. So, in a previous video where I briefly mentioned about JB properties, a subscriber reached out to me and he asked for my opinion on whether I can buy in JB or not. But frankly, I think he had already made up his mind as his views were very confident. He said something like, properties near the CIQ will see at least 30 to 50% capital appreciation in the next 3 years. Of course, I offered my view, but we agreed to disagree. Now look, I'm not here to mock anyone. I understand why people feel this way. There's the RTS that's really going to happen by the end of 2026. People will more seamlessly travel between countries by next year. Malaysians can live in JB and work in Singapore. In fact, Singaporeans can do that too. And with the much lower cost of living over the causeway, it sounds very logical, doesn't it? But often in reality, logic in property investment doesn't always end up with it becoming real. Figures and numbers do better. So let's slow down and let me break it down for you. Let's rewind to the year 2010. Back then, there was a great marketing campaign for Iskandar in Johor. Everyone was talking about how JB will prosper like how Shenzhen was because of Hong Kong. There were so many benefits that were being sold to potential buyers of Iskandar properties, especially to Singaporeans. First, there's the redevelopment of Iskandar region to attract more businesses and talents to set up shop there, with special free trade zones at Medini and Nusajaya towards the west of the region. Second, the city centre was to be totally spruced up with rivers instead of roads so that it becomes more livable. Third, international schools and more hospitals will be built to attract more families to move in. Then, there would be theme parks in the form of Legoland, Angry Birds Activity Park and Hello Kitty Land to attract international tourists. Fifth, there will be the high-speed rail connecting Singapore to KL in just 90 minutes of travel, where even Malaysians staying in KL can commute to Singapore daily for work. And lastly, Singapore and Malaysia had also agreed in principle to build the RTS. So, with so many promises of a transformed Johor state, tens of thousands of investors flocking from Singapore, from the Middle East and from China, even many Malaysians bought into the hype. And incredibly, my hubby and I were sold too by so many property trainers and even property agents here in Singapore. And at that time, we really believed the marketing for it and even thought about buying one property every year to collect passive income. And because we would become property investors, we wouldn't need to ever work again. Oh wait, I forgot about this other point that greatly spurs up the demand for Singaporeans buying in Iskandar then, ABSD. Yes, ABSD was introduced in Singapore in 2011 and then the duty rates were increased in 2013 and also TDSR was introduced that same year and suddenly the appetite for Singapore properties dropped. So guess what? More Singaporeans who have some savings or retirement funds ventured over the causeway to buy up thousands after thousands of properties there. I mean, where else can a Singaporean buy a freehold landed at the price of a BTO? And even the best located condos right next to the CIQ would cost no more than 1/3 the price of our private properties then. And remember, our new condos in Singapore in 2013 were from around 1,200 per square feet only. So yes, Johor became the obvious choice as Iskandar, especially JB, is close to Singapore. The down payments were low and oftentimes developers there offer markup selling prices so that buyers taking loans can even get money out by buying a property there. Suddenly, the dream of affordable private property is real, and especially landed homes, which are a dream for many Singaporeans, have become a reality. So, of course, FOMO kicked in. So many people thought that with so many plus points stated for JB, surely price will go up one. And especially when things were really becoming real, like Legoland, Medini, branded private schools such as Marlborough College, and hospitals like Gleneagles, even Pine Tree Studios, the studio that shot James Bond. All this really set up shop there. But you know the story already. After a while, development started to slow down. So many properties were built too fast and there weren't enough investors to snap up the supply, let alone buyers who would be staying in Johor. Then, the big blow of the high-speed rail not happening anymore waned more demand. China also suddenly disallowed outflow of money anywhere, and the Chinese buyers stopped coming in plane loads. The theme parks and hotels started seeing less visitors and they began to close down. RTS also got delayed. More and more plans changed, more and more timelines were pushed back. So naturally, prices didn't explode the way people expected. In fact, prices dropped. And worse, ringgit fell from 2.5 ringgit is to 1 SGD to eventually 3.5 ringgit is to 1 SGD. So Singaporeans' investment suddenly lost 30% in value if the money is converted back to SGD. But in a way, it's lucky too, because as the ringgit got cheaper, many Singaporeans who are still servicing their loans are paying less. But what about the returns that were marketed? What about the rental prospects? What about the capital appreciation? Before I go into that, can you help to subscribe to my channel if you find my content here valuable and meaningful to you? And help to like too, can? Because YouTube says that 95% of you still unsubscribe. Your simple actions here will go a long way to encourage me to continue putting up contents like this one, which very few other agents dare to speak of. Okay? Done? Thanks so much. Anyway, where was I? Oh yes, rentals. Let me share something about the rental demand and rental yield for properties in JB. And this is as real as it can get because of my first-hand experience in trying to rent out our properties. So yes, let's talk about the potential of a property being able to be rented out in the first place. From propertyguru.my, we can see that there are 13,700 residential units for rent. This is a lot. Next, we look at the rental rates starting with the Ghost City, Forest City. 2-bedroom units there are asking from only 1,200 ringgit monthly. There's nowhere near enough to even servicing the interest if a buyer borrowed 700,000 ringgit at 30 years with Malaysia's 5 to 6% lending rate. So let's move to somewhere nearer to Legoland. It's called Medini at that time and now Iskandar Puteri. 2-bedroom renters there fetch better rates from around 2,000 ringgit, but still not enough to pay the high interest. Never mind, let's move even closer to the causeway now, to Danga Bay. This was another few mega development projects yielding around 10,000 units built. Again, rents are only from 2,100 ringgit. Okay, let's not waste any more time and find out the rental for R&F Princess Cove, the best located development which is next to the JB CIQ. Looks like asking rent is better at around 3,000 ringgit. But wait, how many listings are there in this development alone? 270. Wow, tenants are spoiled for choice. I mean, you can see that I'm not excited with the rental prospects of JB properties. These 2-bedroom units at R&F Princess Cove were sold at around 1 million ringgit or higher for Singaporeans. So even with 70% loan, monthly mortgage would be near to 4,000 ringgit. Like in Singapore, even if the unit could be rented out, it wouldn't cover all the monthly expenses. And don't forget, there's 5% to 6% loan interest. So for the first 15 years or so, a significant portion of your monthly installment goes just into paying the interest. So those buyers who are trying to sell today will be looking at most only 20% to 25% of their capital payout. So now, in 2026, some 13 to 16 years since the last hype, JB agents and even some trainers here in Singapore are back and forth to push for Singaporeans to buy properties in JB. So what's changed? Well, Legoland is still standing, but I don't know how long can they still survive. Hello Kitty and Angry Birds have long closed down along with dozens of hotels, international companies, and of course, the high-speed rail has died before a hole was dug. Only the RTS is left. So really, what effect will this RTS have on property demand in JB? Let's firstly examine some numbers. It's estimated that there are 1.1 million Malaysians working here in Singapore. Of this number, an article stated that up to 300,000 Malaysians travel into Singapore to work or study daily. So we are left with 800,000 of our neighbours who are residing here. Assuming 20% of these Malaysians are willing to rent in JB and commute via the RTS on a daily basis, at 160,000, the number is still high, much higher than the 13,700 I mentioned earlier, right? Oh wait, I forget to mention that there are still 61,000 new residential units that are projected to be available by 2030. Now, with over 74,700 units, would it still be good news for property prices in JB? Surely, 74,700 units is way under supply for 160,000 people who are willing to commute, right? Well, if we add in one factor into the calculation, the answer won't be this straightforward. We need to factor in how many people can the RTS carry during the peak hours. Let's assume JB's RTS stations' morning peak hours are similar to Singapore, which is roughly 2 hours from 7:30 am to 9:30 am. The RTS is able to carry up to 10,000 passengers per hour at full load. Assuming the CIQ can smoothly clear these so many commuters at the same time, so 2 hours of peak hours means 20,000 commuters. If we assume another 10,000 commuters taking the RTS before and after the peak hours, we get 30,000. So we infer that out of the 160,000 Malaysians who are willing to consider moving into JB, only 30,000 of them can effectively do so if they want to commute via RTS. But will each of the 30,000 rent a 2-bedroom unit in JB? I highly doubt so. So let's assume the best case scenario of 2 tenants per 2-bedroom unit. So 15,000 units rented out, right? Well, if the rental is still at 3,000 ringgit, my guess is I don't think working Malaysians are willing to fork out that much money. Because that's still nearly 1,000 Sing dollar monthly, which means each of the 2 tenants will be forking out nearly 500 Sing dollars per person. Isn't this close to what they're paying in Singapore already? Bearing in mind many of the lower wage workers are squeezing 4 to 6 per flat to maximize their savings. So yeah, I don't think with RTS, suddenly all the units at or near the JB RTS station will be snapped up. And with up to 61,000 new properties available within the next 5 years, supply will continue to outstrip demand. And don't forget, during the previous hype period, there were still foreigners from China and the Middle East to soak up the supply. Today, they have effectively all disappeared. So now you say, never mind, I'll buy for capital appreciation. The developers and agents will tell you that prices of properties in Johor have gone up by 50% since 2020. Well, we must not forget that Malaysians' properties, especially those in JB, exist as 2 distinct tiers. The lower, more affordable tier are for locals to buy only. These are the properties that really make money. Foreigners like us, Singaporeans, can only buy properties at 1 million ringgit or more. So we can only buy the luxury tier, which prices hasn't appreciated since 2010 to 2013. It might inch up now with RTS, but with an oversupply of tens of thousands of units currently left unsold, how many other Singaporeans would really buy a resale unit at 50%, 30%, even 10% higher in 5 to 10 years' time? And don't forget that there's this foreign exchange risk. Like me, when I bought when ringgit was at 2.5 ringgit is to 1 SGD and now at 3.15 ringgit is to 1 SGD, we have lost 26% just because of the weak ringgit. And don't also forget the incredibly high bank interest rate. After 30 years of a 700,000 ringgit loan, you would have incurred 650,000 ringgit of interest. So unless your property goes up in value by more than 100%, you won't be making any capital appreciation at all. So, should you buy a JB property today in the hope of the RTS becoming operational by the end of 2026? You probably know my answer already. By the way, there's one more caveat. If you own a HDB and you're both Singaporean, you're not allowed to buy a foreign property. It's okay, you say, I'm staying in a private property. Well then, you will never be allowed to downgrade to the HDB, not even a resale, as long as you hold onto a private residential property. Fine, you argue, I won't declare. Sure. Just don't get caught. Because if you do, your HDB flat will be at risk of being confiscated. But you still tell me you still want to stay in JB, even with what I've mentioned. I mean, you love to stay in a condo because you will never be able to afford one in Singapore. In fact, you want to live in a big house with a front porch that can park 2 cars, which costs less than our COE. And you want to enjoy the fabulous and more affordable food there. So you need to buy, right? Well, you don't. I actually have a solution for you. Don't buy that. Instead, rent out your entire HDB. With, let's say, 3,000 of rental income, you can exchange this to 9,000 ringgit and rent a 3-bedroom luxury condo or even a semi-D further away at 3,000 ringgit, at most 4,000 ringgit. Then, buy a small car at 80,000 ringgit new or just 50,000 ringgit used. And you have up to 5,000 ringgit monthly to spend on food, petrol, utilities, and much, much more. So, at this point, allow me to clarify. I'm not saying you absolutely must not buy a property in JB or JB properties are scam. Compared to many other countries, your risk to not getting a property after you pay is relatively low. It's still possible your developer might fall halfway through construction, but then you have a ton of choices in the resale market today to avoid that risk. but I cannot see any possibility of making money with a purchase there, at least not in the midterm. And the RTS alone won't likely increase rental demand and certainly not capital appreciation. I'm happy to be wrong, however, but looking at my own purchase experience, I'm still trying to be able to just break even. Okay, don't forget to like this video if you found it useful, and subscribe too if you haven't. And if you're feeling that I've given you some good advice, do consider sending me a thanks too. By sending a thanks with even a small $2 contribution, it will go a long way into helping me make this content for you. Anyway, if you also need to speak to someone regarding your property needs here at home in Singapore, feel free to contact me. Don't worry, I won't sell you any foreign properties, certainly not in JB.